You guys want to know a secret? The Rise of Kingdoms meta isn't real, or at the very least, it's not as real as people think it is, and this is something that nobody talks about, which is why I need to address it today, because this is super important to understanding why some legendary commanders in Rise of Kingdoms get so much praise, and some people say they're so good, and then you get them and they suck, and that feels really bad. And so today we need to just be honest about the Rise of Kingdoms meta, because I've been playing this game for almost 8 years at this point, and throughout the entirety of the time that I've been playing this game, I don't think there's ever been a moment in time where the entire community got together and was like, yup, this is the meta, and everyone agrees. That doesn't happen. There's always people discussing and debating who's the single best commander and what's the best commander pair, what is the best troop type for open field PvP, what's the best troop type and best commander pair for free-to-play players versus rally and garrison players. This has always been a topic of discussion. So in today's video, I'm going to give you 10 reasons why the Rise of Kingdoms meta is not what you think it is, even though it feels so obvious, right? I mean, everyone has strong opinions on this if they've been playing the game for a long time. So without further ado, let's jump right in. But first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, really quick, as you guys know, I'm a partner creator with Rise of Kingdoms. So if you want more Rise of Kingdoms content like this, that helps you better understand the meta, better understand your account and what you should be doing to be the best player possible, leave a like down below. It helps out the channel way more than you realize, and consider subscribing while you're down there if you actually enjoyed this video. Okay, reason number one why nobody can agree on what the end game meta is because all of us are using different commanders, even if we are using the same commanders. And I know that that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but let me show you guys exactly what I mean. Okay, this is my Emperor Qin, this is the gear that I currently have equipped on him, and this is my formation with all of my inscriptions. Okay, now I want you guys to do something important. In the comment section below, is my Emperor Qin better than yours or worse than yours? And by that I mean, do you have better stats here? Do you have better inscriptions on your armaments? Do you have better equipment, better gear on this commander? Let me know in the comments section below. And that is exactly what I'm talking about, and the reason that this is bullet point number one and the first thing we have to talk about in this video. We are all using different commanders. My Emperor Qin has different stats than your Emperor Qin because I've been playing the game for a different amount of time than you. I've gotten lucky with my crits on some pieces of gear and unlucky with my crits on other pieces of gear. And this is especially important if you're taking advice from two types of players, okay? And this is going to sound counterintuitive because I'm biased, okay? But if you're taking advice from a content creator or a super high-end whale player who has maxed out everything, you need to take all of that with a grain of salt, okay? And again, I know I'm biased here. I know I'm a content creator. I know that my goal in theory should not be to tell you to think twice about taking a content creator's recommendations, because it's in my best interest that you watch my videos, of course. But more important than that, it's important that I be honest with my audience and say, look, I've been playing the game for 8 years and my equipment might be farther along, more progressed than yours. And again, the other category of player is the whale player, the super kraken. If they have everything maxed, the probability that their advice is going to land perfectly one-to-one with their account and your account is almost zero, right? And I think one of the biggest examples of this that we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks, I would say, is actually with Ivar the Boneless, right? Ivar the Boneless is a commander that I talked about in my infantry guide a few months ago, saying like, look, you can put him behind Sun Tzu Prime and that's going to perform really well, especially if you have a 3 army lineup for infantry, and even more so if you are a rally player for infantry already. You have him maxed out with this expertise and you've got all talented gear, right? If you have the iconic tier 5 special inscription Horn of Fury, then you're going to get more rage out of triggering that Horn of Fury, right? And that's going to move the needle when it comes to the Sun Tzu Prime Ivar combination, because Sun Tzu gives you some rage here. You've also got rage on Ivar's active skill, and that special talent on the Horn moves the needle a little bit more for that specific combination than a lot of people might realize, right? And so in that situation, if you are that Giga Chad Mega Whale and you've got the perfect gear and you've maxed Ivar and Sun Tzu, then you might have a really good experience using this pair in the open field. But if you are a free-to-play player and you recently expertise Sun Tzu and you have a 5-5-1-1 Ivar, because frankly the third skill and the fourth skill don't do anything in the field, so why even bother, right? You can get 190 sculptures for the first two skills and you get his massive AoE, his march speed, and all of his stats. I mean, that sounds like a good deal, right? And it is a good deal on paper, but again, if you're a free-to-play or a low spender and you've got, you know, one or two purple pieces on your Sun Tzu Prime, then it's like all of a sudden, again, we are not using the same commanders even if we're using the same commanders, right? And so there's lots of other examples of this, right? I think one of the reasons that I was able to use Ragnar Prime for so long is because my gear was just really good on my second infantry march. I had optimized things in such a way where I wasn't seeing the negative effects of his march speed, his slow march speed, for quite a while. These days it's caught up to me, but for a while I could use CPO Prime, Ragnar Prime, and I would do really well even when people said he was dead. This is also especially true for commander pairs like Joan of Arc Prime primary and King Arthur secondary, right? This commander pair is super high damage output, tons of skill damage here, and you could absolutely pop off here if you've got the iconic tier 5, you've got the special talent on everything's maxed out, you've got a cavalry zenith of power skin, and you've got all of these advantages going for you, then okay, that commander pair might work super well. But if you stop playing the game for a few months and you just came back and all you have is Joan of Arc Prime and you grab King Arthur from the return event or the swap event or whatever, all of a sudden you're looking at this and you're like, well, wait a minute, this commander pair like should perform super well, and for some people it does, but for me it sucks, right? And that's the number one thing that I want to touch on here. But here's the thing, there are other reasons why a commander pair like Joan with Arthur, or more commonly Arthur with Achilles, there's other reasons why these commander pairs might perform super well for some people and horrible for other people, and it actually might not have anything to do with your equipment. You might have the same equipment as other people, similar armaments, similar inscriptions, and get two completely different results out of the same commander pair. Okay, why is that? Well, let's segue into the second reason why people can't agree on the end game meta, and that is something that is completely out of, or I should say mostly out of your control, and that is your enemies in KvK. And this is such a big deal, and I'm surprised that people don't talk about this more in their commander guide videos, their tier list videos. I try to touch on this when I can, but this is the number one reason I even decided to make this video, okay? And that is that your opponents in KvK play such a huge factor in how good your commander pairs are, okay? And why is that? In some situations you are going to find yourself in perhaps a zone 5 or maybe even a pass 7, a Kingsland. You're going to find yourself in a situation where you are fighting up against opponents that seem really bad, right? And there's plenty of reasons why they might seem really bad, okay? Perhaps your kingdom is older, and so you guys just have, you know, you've had more time to accumulate the best commanders, you had more time to accumulate the best equipment and armaments, or perhaps you're just a larger kingdom fighting up against a smaller kingdom, right? And in that case, you're just going to have more armies on the field. And this is something that is true in Rise of Kingdoms as it is true in real life. The larger army oftentimes has a huge advantage, right? I mean, it makes sense logically. I mean, if you show up to the battlefield with, you know, 3 million troops and the enemy shows up with 1 million troops, well, that's a 3-to-1 advantage. And so it's no surprise that you might trade 3-to-1 every time you fight them, right? Now, just as it's guaranteed that sometimes you're going to fight weak enemies, it's also true that sometimes you will be the weak enemy, right? There's going to be times where your enemies are just stronger than you. They have more people on the field for a longer period of time. They have better equipment. They have more armaments, inscriptions, or whatever, right? And they're just going to crush you, right? They're going to crush you. And in this scenario, the biggest variable isn't your commanders. It's not necessarily your equipment or your armaments or anything like that. It's just that there's more enemies. There's more people. You're getting surrounded more than your enemies are, and you're taking more damage. And so I can sit here and say, like, look, when I use Arthur Philip, that army sucks for me, right? It gets absolutely deleted. It fills my hospital. It trades poorly every time. and it doesn't move the needle, right? And it might be the case that, you know, this commander pair, if you know anything about it, is quite squishy, right? There's not that much tankiness with an Arthur Philip March, okay? And so for me, it could be the case that in a lot of my KVKs, I'm just going up against a stronger enemy, right? And so my squishy marches are disproportionately affected by the disadvantageous outcome of the open field engagement. However, another player who, let's say 3 out of their last 4 KVKs, they've been the dominant kingdom, they've had more people online, they've had more players on the battlefield, they've had weak enemies 3 out of 4 times, well, their Arthur Philip might perform really well, right? It might trade decent, and you might get a lot of supportive value out of that Philip. And so again, this is the same commander pair, and even with the same, you know, similar, I should say, armaments, inscriptions, whatever, you can have 2 totally different perspectives on the exact same march, and it has nothing to do with you. You didn't do anything wrong, right? It's just that this commander pair performed really bad for you, and it performed really well for that Kraken that you watched their YouTube video, or, you know, that high spending R4 in your kingdom, like they told you to use this and it didn't work for you. This could easily be why. And on this point of having strong versus weak enemies, I've noticed that this variable, right, the strength of your enemies, disproportionately affects glass cannon marches and super tanky marches, right? So for example, Gangnam Chan, when he was first announced, everyone looked at him and they're like, oh, well, it's single target damage, like it's, yeah, he's tanky, but it's like he's not really gonna hit anything super hard, so he's not really gonna move the needle, right? A lot of people were not excited about Gangnam Chan. However, if you find yourself in those engagements where your enemy is much stronger than you, all of a sudden your Gangnam Chan Achilles is probably one of the last things on the battlefield, right? A lot of your other stuff got sad faced already, and your Gangnam Chan Achilles is still there getting kill points, right? And so disproportionately in that situation, your Gangnam Chan actually was a great choice. On the flip side, right, let's say you use your Arthur with your Achilles, this is a glass cannon march, and if you run that glass cannon into stronger enemies, guess what? It's made of glass, it's going to crumble, right? And you're going to get horrible trades. However, perhaps the KVK before that, your enemies were weaker, and this was the best trading march on your account by far, right? Because it's just got insane damage output, and if you're overwhelming the enemy, they aren't going to be targeting your Arthur Achilles, right? And you're going to get insane value out of that march. And so I just want to point this out, where not only is this a big component of why people can't agree on the endgame meta, but also it disproportionately affects some commander pairs more than others, right? So in other words, you know, your Sun Tzu Liu Che, sometimes it performs, you know, sometimes it trades 8-1, and sometimes it trades 2 or 3-1, but in either scenario you're still trading positive, so it's like, okay, it's still a great march, you don't really think about it too much, right? Whereas in another case, the Arthur Achilles, you know, last KVK when the enemies were weaker, it was trading 3-1, and now it's trading 0.5-1, right? And that's a big difference, and you'll notice that more with certain armies rather than others, and mostly it's those glass cannons, and sometimes it's with those tanky commanders. Okay, moving on to reason number 3 why lots of people still disagree about the open field meta, and this is yet another one that's kind of not really in your control. I mean, it is, we'll talk about it, but it has to do with open field coordination. And what I mean by this is that if you are in a highly competitive kingdom, there is a very good chance, I mean, it's guaranteed, in fact, if you're a competitive kingdom, that you have at least 1 or more war leaders in your alliance or your kingdom, okay? And these are individuals that are really good at leading the open field engagements, knowing where players should be, where they should not be, pushing objectives, burning flags. War leaders play a really big part in how well you might perform in the open field, and the reason for this is actually really simple when you think about it, right? And just to be clear, I'm not putting this all on war leads, it also has to do with your ability to follow instructions and read markers, okay? So we all have our own roles to play here, but if you have a war lead that is super level-headed and they know the goal, they know the objective, and that's all they're focused on, right? And they know exactly where to put their murder ball in the open field, when to put their murder ball, when to push, when to retreat, and they're able to clearly communicate these things, and like I said, you as a player are able to follow those things. Well, if you have a group of 80 or 100 players all moving in unison, all pushing together, all retreating together, all on the same page, the kingdom is operating like a well-oiled machine, and in those scenarios your armies have the highest probability of performing really well. The flip side of that is chaos, right? There's no war lead online, or you are off doing your own thing. You're not following instructions, right? You're off, you're kill chasing, you're not following the objective, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you're just off on your own. In those times of lack of coordination and chaos, that's when your armies have the highest probability, okay, it's not guaranteed, but it's when you have the highest probability of performing worse, right? So let's use a common commander for example here. This is a commander called Zhuge Liang. You might have heard of him, all right, might have heard of him. He's been meta for a while now. Okay, this is a commander, and this also can extend to Ragnar Prime as well, but his time has kind of passed. I think Zhuge Liang's a more interesting commander to talk about right now, but this is a commander who objectively 5 target circular AoE, strong debuff, tons of health stats, and extra AoE on the 4th skill. There's so much to love about him. He's got a rage engine on the expertise, very powerful commander, but he's also lacking march speed, right, which is a big deal. And so Zhuge Liang as a 5 target circular AoE commander actually performs the best when you are fighting with the rest of your kingdom, pushing an objective at the right time and retreating at the right time. Doing so means that you're probably engaging with the maximum number of enemies, which gives you the maximum chances to hit all 5 targets every single time you have a skill shot, right? It also means that when you retreat, there's all of your other allies that are retreating at the same time, and so the probability that you are the one that's caught out of position with your slow march speed goes down a little bit, right? Now conversely, if you're off in some corner doing your own thing, you're trying to chase, enemies that are, retreating with low health, and you're chasing them down and you're using your Zhuge Liang, well, okay, you're probably not hitting 5 targets, and it's going to be a struggle to chase them, especially if they're cavalry. You're not going to catch them, right? So you're only going to be hitting them for a little bit, and then, oh, they ran and you can't get them again, right? And so in those situations, you're going to get very little value out of Zhuge Liang, right? And so it's the same commander, but it's 2 different situations where in one instance, you've got a well-oiled machine, the war lead is telling you exactly what to do, and you're following directions. And in the other situation, maybe you're not following directions, or maybe there's just no war lead online, and so you're just using your best judgment to try and figure out how can you move the needle the most as a single player, right? And sometimes there's just no good answer, and so you're like, okay, well, I'll just go farm kill points then, because I don't know what else to do. So hopefully you guys can understand the sort of logic that I'm going with here, and that is that not only do different enemies contribute to different outcomes, but also your own kingdom and leadership can influence how well you perform with certain commanders, and also your ability to follow those directions. Reason number 4 why players might disagree on who's meta and who isn't is actually skill expression. And what I mean by this is your skill as a player being shown on the battlefield, right? And this actually is something that is in your control, but there are some commanders that I would say have a slightly higher skill ceiling than others, and the best way to explain this is by actually talking about the easiest commander to use in the game, and that is Emperor Qin, right? Emperor Qin is kill points on easy mode. He deals AoE damage every single turn. He hits everybody around you all the time. You don't have to worry about pointing your AoE in the right direction. You don't have to worry about him being too slow because he's got march speed here, so you could pair him with somebody with more march speed to make sure that he has the ability to get away if he needs to. He's literally just easy mode, right? He literally has so much damage output, massive DPS, he's got the health, he's got the defense. Like really, there's just no way to really mess up Emperor Qin, right? He just gets kills no matter what. He is easy mode. Okay, now on the flip side of that is another DPS march that's super high DPS but is not on easy mode and is in fact hard mode, and that is a commander pairing that I mentioned earlier, and that would be somebody like Arthur with Achilles, right? This commander pair has insane DPS but requires a lot more micromanaging than the Emperor Qin, right? And why is that? Well, first of all, only one of these commanders has a circular AoE, so if you want to get the max value out of King Arthur, you probably should be facing the right direction every single time, right? Not turning around and trying to get the straggler off on the side. But also this march is probably faster than most of your other armies because it's cavalry, right? And so it's going to find itself out of position more often, and an out of position glass cannon is a dead glass cannon, and so you're going to have to really make sure that this march is in the right place at the right time at all times, and then retreating when you need to, right? Retreating when you get, to a third of your health or whatever the case might be, to get the best trades that you can possibly get. Okay, and so in this instance, again, we have 2 marches that are just full DPS. There's very little more that these do. It's mostly damage. There's not much, like, I mean, there's a little bit of debuffing with taking rage and stuff like that, right? We have rage reduction on King Arthur as well for the enemies, but like the main thing you're doing with both these marches is DPS. But one of them you just throw out there and he hits everything around him and he gets all the kills and then he dies or he goes home and that's it. The other one you have to micromanage, and you can still do really well with it, but a player who's not very skilled might have a higher probability of getting a worse trade with the Arthur Achilles. Okay, moving on to reason number 5 why lots of people might disagree on how effective certain commanders are. This has to do not just with skill, which was what we just talked about, but also play style, right? Some players play differently than others. Some players like to maximize every single engagement for the best possible trade, and other players like to charge headfirst into the combat so that way they can fight as much as possible and then they get sad faced and then they can send out troops again, and they just want to maximize the engagement time. They want to maximize the number of kill points they get even if their trades are significantly worse. This also comes down to the amount of time you have available. You know what I mean? Like, kingdoms have kill requirements oftentimes, and if you don't have that much time to play Rise of Kingdoms, then okay, well, when there's a fight you better be charging in there because there's no time for you to kind of pick and choose your engagements, because if you don't get your kill point requirements then you're in trouble, right? So some people have to charge in because they have to take full advantage of the few opportunities they have to actually play the game, because they have a job, they have families, they have kids, whatever the case might be. And to a degree this also factors in player skill, right? I mean, obviously that's kind of, you know, play style and skill, they're pretty closely related. There is some overlap there, right? Some people know when to chase the enemy, some people know when to retreat. That's partially skill, that's partially play style, right? Some people just don't like retreating even if they know they should, they just want to get the kill points. And there's also a certain skill to understanding when you should be more aggressive or less aggressive, right? I mean, if you're going into Kingsland, then you know the choice to retreat isn't really for most players that's a luxury, right? I mean, really you shouldn't be retreating that much. If your ball marker says push, then there's no retreating at yellow, right? When it comes to Kingsland, it's like, okay, you've got, you know, anywhere from 12 to, you know, 72 hours before this whole thing is over, right? In some cases Kingsland goes for 5 days like mine did, and we'll talk about that in a video soon, but for the most part, right, Kingslands are decided within a couple of days, maybe even less than a day. So retreating is wasting time, it's wasting uptime, it's wasting burn time, it's wasting whatever you're doing, right? You want to push all the time to get the win in Kingsland. And so in that way your play style in Kingsland might be different than your play style in another part of the KVK, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute actually. But beyond that, right, something else that might change your play style is, you know, if you're, like I said, if you're the war leader, right, or you're one of the top players, highest power players in your kingdom, then you might be looked to lead the charge into the enemy territory, right? Because it's like, okay, you have all max tech everything, you have the best gear, you have all the special inscriptions, you have everything, your account's perfect, right? And so if anybody should charge in their head first, it's going to be the guy that has the highest probability of trading well regardless, you know what I mean? And so that might change your play style as well, right? Like the Giga Chad Kraken can kind of just charge in there and do whatever he wants because he's probably going to trade pretty good no matter what. Now on the topic of play styles, and I just touched on this a moment ago, so I want to kind of just circle back here. Reason number 6 why some commanders might perform really well for some people and not so much for others, and that has to do with different fighting environments. And so like I said before, Kingsland fighting is different than zone 5 fighting. Well, what about altar fighting, right? Fighting in an altar is different than fighting in other areas of KVK as well. And so if there's a commander pair that, you know, you always use for altar, for example, and it always trades insanely well, then that's going to stick in your mind, right? You're going to have that bias towards that commander because you're like, oh, you know, for a while, I'll give you an example. For a while it was Guan Scipio for me, right? I was using Guan Scipio in altars, and that'll tell you how long ago this example is, right? But Guan Scipio in altars was insane, right? For me at least, it was insane. You jump in and out of the nodes. Guan Yu has that skill that says when he exits combat you heal with 1,000 healing factor, right? Like there was so much to love about that march. The silencing, obviously everybody loves that from Guan Yu, that's like his claim to fame basically. But my point is with this section is that, you know, if you have a commander pair that does really well in one area, it might not do really well in other areas, and depending on your KVK, maybe you just spent more time, you spent disproportionately more time fighting in zone 5 than you did in Kingsland, right? And in zone 5 you were able to retreat when you needed to, and it was a little bit more chill, and it wasn't, you know, there weren't high stakes, and so you could play really safely and only take engagements that you need. And in that scenario your Alp Arslan with your Herman Prime absolutely popped off, stuff, right? And then you go into Kingsland and now you're not retreating ever, and all of a sudden this thing is trading like trash, right? And so it just depends, you know, the player that, if, you know, let's say you're watching a YouTuber or somebody's giving you advice on your account and they say, okay, well, my Hua Arthur actually did really well my last KVK. It's like, well, maybe it's because they had a lot of fighting in zone 5 and then their Kingsland ended in 12 hours and they didn't have enough time to see just how poorly this might trade when you can't retreat, right? So hopefully you can understand the distinction of this bullet point versus the previous one about different play styles. There's also just different environments with which you're fighting, and you might have a bias for a commander's performance because your recent KVKs have had more fighting in some zones than others, and in those zones you have certain outcomes versus other zones. Like, again, Altar, you might have a totally different experience with Hua Arthur and Altar than you do in Kingsland, because of course you will. All right, now let's move on to the 7th reason why people might disagree on the meta. And at this point in the video, the next 4 reasons are slightly more subjective and they have more to do with player bias. Okay, so I want you to understand how this actually plays a role rather than certain engagements in the game or certain things that the game sets up for you, like your enemies or your war lead, right? But number 7 is that different players have different definitions of best, and this is so key. This is absolutely critical, and I think a lot of people misunderstand this. Some people might look at Philip and say he was one of the best investments that they've ever made in Rise of Kingdoms, and that's because they were able to use him behind their King Arthur, and they were able to use him behind their Zhuge Liang, and they were able to use him in Sunset Canyon, and they were able to use him in all these different areas, and they were able to get all this value out of Philip, right? Now, if they looked at their battle reports, those reports might not have been the best in the world, but to them, a commander that they invest 690 sculptures in and they can use in 3 or 4 different lineups and all these different game modes, that's really valuable, and to them that's one of their best investments, right? Another example of a commander that, you know, a player who values flexibility might like is somebody like David, right? David is a commander that some cavalry players are using in the open field and getting tremendous value, but then they throw him in a garrison and he's one of the best garrison commanders in the game, right? And so you've got a commander that to them is such a good investment. It's one of the best investments because they can use him in so many different areas, right? This is something that, you know, same thing with Ivar. He's a rally commander. You can use him in the field, and historically one of the most famous examples of this is of course Attila, right? Attila is a commander where he's a rally commander, but he's also great in the field, and surprise surprise, he's great in garrisons, right? He's fantastic in garrisons as well. And so this is a commander that's super flexible. Now, is Attila the best commander in the game when it comes to trades? Maybe not, right? But in terms of flexibility and longevity, he's certainly one of the best. Now, on the flip side of that, some players might just care about DPS. That's the name of the game for them, and that's all they care about. So in that situation, they care about Emperor Qin, right? Or YSG. YSG is a commander who has like no utility. He gives you rage and damage and AoE. That's it. That's all he does, right? Barely even gives you stats, in fact. So that's a commander that, you know, somebody who values DPS, that's what they're going to care about. Same thing with Bai Qi. Bai Qi is a commander who has very little utility. He's just damage. He's all damage on his Akid, and that's pretty much it, right? And so Bai Qi is a commander that for some, he actually might start aging poorly. Maybe this is a topic for another video, but commanders who only deal tons of damage quickly get power crept by other commanders that also deal tons of even more damage, right? Damage is the easiest thing to power creep in Rise of Kingdoms. And so a commander like Bai Qi, when he came out, he was literally a 5 target William Wallace, which is like, oh my God, he's so much better, right? So some people really valued that, but others might look at this kit and say, well, there's not much here besides the damage, so it's not really for me, right? I don't want to invest in that. I'm just going to stick with my Sun Tzu Prime Liu Che, right? And Liu Che is, yeah, he's a little less damage, but he's got more to offer here, right? He's got that extra rage, the combo attack on an infantry commander, right? There's something interesting, there's something unique, and that adds more value. And to them, Liu Che would be considered a better commander than Bai Qi. And so this comes down to not only what you value as a player, but also what you mean by best, right? Like right now, you could say objectively the best commander in the game when it comes to trades, DPS, and everything like that. The best performing commander is Emperor Qin with YSG, right? You could say that's literally the best, but you can also define best as the best investment in terms of having the most longevity, right? So again, that's when we would look at YSG and say, okay, YSG is the best commander because you've been able to use him since 2018 and he's been good the entire time, basically. Right around when Zhuge Liang came out, he sort of fell off a little bit, but then he came back with Emperor Qin, right? And so like YSG is an example of a commander where longevity is something something that might contribute to being the best commander, right? And same thing, you know, when it comes to investing in a commander, depending on where we are in the release cycle, that longevity can make a big difference. So if you invested in Liu Che when he first came out, that's one of the best investments you could have made. But if you invest in him today, now it's like, okay, well, yes, he's still meta, he's one of the best commanders in the game, but like he's old now, and he could get power crept out of the game with the next infantry release, who knows? And so in that situation, like he's less of a best investment right now. And so that definitely plays a factor in what you mean when you say best commander in Rise of Kingdoms. Reason number 8 why people can't agree on the end game meta, at least a lot of the times, has to do with population bias. This is a psychological phenomenon where if you see everyone saying a commander is good, you're more likely to agree with them and say, oh yeah, that commander must be really good, right? I mean, that's what right now we look at Emperor Qin, everyone agrees Emperor Qin is the best in the game, pretty much, and so you're more likely to agree with that. You're looking at all these thousands of players maxing this commander, and you're like, okay, well, he must be good, right? But this also works in another way, and that is if you don't hear a lot of people talking about a commander, you might assume that commander is bad. And this is what I talked about earlier with somebody like, well, with Arthur, this is a commander pair that people use all the time still. It's still totally fine. Now, is it the best commander pair in the game for cavalry? No, absolutely not, right? It definitely is outclassed by many other pairings. I'm not going to sit here and tell you otherwise, but depending on your KVK matchup and your play style and your equipment and everything, like if you've got good wedge 2 armaments and you've got great inscriptions and stuff, like yeah, you could totally use this commander pair, no problem. Even though a lot of people don't talk about it that much right now, it's still fine for the time being. And this is where, like, you know, the wisdom of the group is oftentimes right, but not always, right? It's not always correct. So for example, we recently discovered as a community that the best commander pairing, at least according to vast amounts of data, the best commander pairing for Sun Tzu is actually either Liu Che or Ivar the Boneless. Now Ivar has a lot fewer battle reports, so it's harder to really like tell, but with over 1.4 million battle reports for Sun Tzu Prime primary with Bai Chi secondary, the overall score of this March is 6.87, and if we take a look at the Sun Tzu with Liu Che, it's a 7.31, right? Overall it's a better commander pairing. Now again, to be clear, this video is proof that there's a million other reasons why that might be the case, but the best data that we have available as a community suggests that you're better off using Sun Tzu Prime with Liu Che than you are Sun Tzu Prime with Bai Chi, okay? However, as you saw, there were over 3 times more battle reports with Sun Tzu Prime Bai Chi, right? And so the group collectively was like, oh, just put those two together, and that's what everybody did. And it turned out that following the group, maybe I'm not saying always, not saying definitively, but maybe that wasn't the correct play. Maybe the correct play was Sun Tzu Liu Che all along, which by the way, I've been doing that, bro. Hey, welcome to the party, boys. I've been doing that. And you would know that if you were subscribed to the channel and you watch my infantry guide, right? But again, hopefully you can understand my point here with population bias. If everyone points you in one direction, you're more likely to agree with that, even though it might not entirely be true. And it's just something that you definitely should keep in mind. Next up is confirmation bias. This is number 9 on the list of why people can't agree with the open field meta sometimes. And I think a really good example is a commander like Alp Arslan. Another really great example might be somebody like Shajar, and to an extent, I know people might be mad if I say this, but William Wallace as well. What do all 3 of these commanders have in common? Well, when they landed in the game, there were players that maxed them immediately, and they want them to be really good. I mean, they just spent 690 sculptures, they spent however many gems spinning the wheel, they just spent whatever they needed to spend to make these commanders viable. In my case, I have a whole new set of gear, right? And confirmation bias suggests that if you invest so heavily into something, then you're biased in favor of that thing, right? You want the outcome to be what you expect, because otherwise you're wrong, right? And nobody likes admitting that they're wrong. And so investing in commanders, you know, again, maybe Alp it's a little early to say with Alp, although reports haven't been great with him, but Shajar certainly is a commander where, you know, when people invested in her, there was a group of people that, and even to this day I still get comments where there are people who are like, my Emperor Qin Shajar is the best commander pair in the game, it's not even close, Shajar is so slept on, she's so good and nobody even knows it. And it's like, look, I'm not saying you're wrong, right? Because again, this entire video is explaining why that could easily be the case for you, and you could absolutely be right in your own subjective way. However, most likely what we're seeing is confirmation bias. That's somebody who spent all their sculptures and gems on Shajar, and they really want them to be good, right? They really want to be justified in that decision, and so they're kind of biased towards why that commander is performing well. Or on the flip side, right, you might look at that and say, okay, well, my Shajar, it's not my Shajar performing badly, it's just that I've had really bad lag this KVK, right? Or my allies are just trash and they're just not showing up in the battlefield, and that's why my reports are so bad, right? If our allies would just show up, then we would get better reports, right? And that's why Shajar is performing poorly. Same thing with William Wallace, same thing with Alp Arslan, and you could really do this with anything, right? Even Gangnam Chan, you could say, hey, my Gangnam Chan, I love my Gangnam Chan, he's a great investment, okay, but he's performing bad because of lag. Really, it's lag, you know what I mean? And or the game is, you know, he keeps swinging out of position, and the game is swinging him out of position, and it's just not my fault, right? And that's why he's trading bad. It's not because he was a bad investment. And so again, I don't want to ramble too long on here, because I think you guys understand the point of confirmation bias, right? But it's very important to understand why, you know, some people might have confirmation bias towards or maybe against a certain commander, right? So like for me, I've had multiple KVKs where my Arthur Phillip is just, it performs horribly, right? And so now I have a bias against that March, and you know, if I sit here and say, oh, you know, Arthur Phillip is not performing well, it's not performing well, I don't like this March, and then it turns out that the March is actually really good, well, I don't want to be wrong, right? And so I'm biased to go in, to continue down the path of what I've already sort of admitted to myself or to people. And so the confirmation bias works in both ways. So always remember that when you're evaluating advice that you get from somebody, and also advice that you're giving, or when you're just looking at your own your battle reports, right? You can look objectively and be like, okay, you know, is this investment, was it actually really good, or do I just want it to be really good? Always keep that in mind. And the last thing, number 10, okay, the last reason why people can't always agree on the meta is an emotional attachment. I know this sounds silly, it's a mobile game, right? But sort of an emotional attachment to a commander investment. Okay, now the most famous example of this was Nevsky. Okay, when Nevsky was getting pushed out of the meta, there were a group of people, and I know this because they were commenting on all my videos, okay, but there was a group of people saying Nevsky is still the GOAT, he's still one of the best commanders in the game. Omniarch, you're wrong about this, he's so good, he's one of the best commanders, right? And there really was no data to support that, right? I mean, Hua just hit harder, there were newer, better commanders, there was just, the writing was on the wall. Nevsky's time in the spotlight was over, but people had been using this commander for many years at that point, and this was one of their biggest investments, right? Especially if you're a free-to-play player or something, like you don't get that many commanders to max per year, right? You only get maybe 2 or 3 commanders to max a year if you're a free-to-play player and you're really active and you're really doing all the right things, right? Maybe 4 if you're insane, right? But it's usually 2 to 3. And so you have an emotional attachment to that investment. He's been good for so long, and you don't want to let that go. You don't want it to be the case that the thing you've invested in is no longer meta, right? To a lesser extent, we saw this with Guan Yu, right? I even fell for this with Guan Yu as well. I used Guan CPO for quite a while. The only time I benched that was when Ragnar Prime came out, right? But you know, in my case, I actually was still getting pretty good reports with my Guan CPO all the way up to the very end, but for a lot of people they weren't, right? They were not getting great reports with that. And so I don't know, maybe it was my gear or my talent builder playstyle, I don't know what it was that I was doing decent with that. But there are just these commanders that you invest in and you use them for so long, and you've got an emotional attachment to that commander, and you want to keep using them, right? They've been good for so long, you don't want to retire that commander. I think Joan of Arc Prime is another great example of this, right? I think CPO Prime might be another example, and to a lesser extent, like we're gonna start talking about Zhuge Liang in the same way. I'm gonna call it here, okay? It's gonna be called sooner or later, but Zhuge Liang, I mean, like, this is a commander that, listen boys, he's been out for, you know, 3 years at this point, and he's gonna start to get power crept at some point. It just is what it is, you know? And so we're gonna look at that in the same way, and you might even be hearing this and saying, Omniarch, what are you talking about? Zhuge Liang, he's part of one of the best commander marches in the whole game, like we're not gonna be I'm telling you, I've been here since day one, boys. Hey, listen to me, okay? 2,745 consecutive login days, I've seen it all. Every commander that people said would never fall out of the meta has eventually fallen out of the meta, whether it's Alexander the Great or it's Nevsky or whoever the case might be. Even YSG, like I said, he's in the meta now, he was in the meta in the beginning, but there was a period of time where you didn't really use him in a 2-army lineup, right? A lot of people forget that, and maybe you would use him in a 3-army lineup, but really it depended, right? So that's kind of it, right? Like there's always commanders whose time is over, and we have an emotional attachment with that commander, and we don't want it to be over, but objectively it might be. And so that's it, folks. That is 10 different reasons why Rise of Kingdoms players might not agree on the end game meta, even though we're all using the same commanders. They all have the same skills, they all have the same talents. You can run the same talent build on your Sun Tzu Prime as I run on my Sun Tzu Prime, and we can get totally different results for all of the reasons that we talked about in this video. Some of those reasons are stronger than others, right? But all of them, I think, play some factor into why different players have different experiences with the best commanders in the game. Even if we look at objective data, we can literally look at actual data and just interpret it differently, right? I mean, it happens all the time. People can justify one way or another why a commander is good and why a commander is bad. And that's kind of one of the cool parts about Rise of Kingdoms is, you know, this is the strategy part of the game, is trying to figure out what commanders are the best for me in my situation, with my opponents, with my kingdom, with my war lead, with my knowledge of the game, my skill of the game, my play style. How can I optimize all of those things and have the stars align to use the best commander pairs that I could possibly make for my account? And that's the cool part about Rise of Kingdoms. That's one of the things that I love the most about this game, is collecting the different commanders, collecting the different gear and armaments and special inscriptions, and trying to piece together the best 5, 6, 7 army lineup that I possibly can to smash into the enemies. And that's why I've been playing this game for 8 years. But this video, I wanted to bring this video to you guys because this topic is so insanely important and nobody talks about this, but it needs to be said. So hopefully you found this video useful and informative, and if you did, make sure you drop a thumbs up on it, especially if you made it all the way to the end of the video. Please leave a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel a ton. It takes just a second, and while you're down there, double check to see if you're subscribed. A lot of times YouTube will actually unsubscribe you from channels. I don't know why, but I've had people tell me. So double check to make sure you subscribe down below, and if you're new here and you like the video, consider subscribing. Click the bell to be notified the next time I upload more Rise of Kingdoms content, and comment down below your thoughts and opinions on all of this. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.